There is a place where time and space are but whispers on the wind, a place where the soul is free to roam and the heart is open to the truth that has been hidden for lifetimes. You stand at the threshold of that place now, at the beginning of a journey that has been calling to you, perhaps for years, perhaps for lifetimes. You feel it in the air. The very space around you feels charged with something greater, something deeper. The winds, the earth, the very stars above are calling you toward a destiny that is uniquely yours. This is not a journey that you chose with the mind, nor one that can be understood by the logical and reasoning part of yourself. This is a journey that has been placed before you by the very forces that weave the universe, a journey not of the body, but of the spirit, a journey of discovery, not of new lands, but of new horizons within your own soul. You are not here by chance. The universe does not make mistakes, nor does it leave things to randomness. Your soul has been drawn to this moment, to these words, as the traveler is drawn to the farthest star on a quiet night. Something deep within you knows that the time has come. The time has come to listen, to follow the whispers that have always called you, yet that you have been too busy, too distracted, to hear. You may wonder what this journey will require. The answer is simple, though it may not always be easy. It will require your heart. It will require your trust. It will require your willingness to follow the unknown, to follow the signs that have been placed before you, even when the path is not clear. This is not a path that can be mapped by the mind, but one that is felt, sensed, and experienced with the heart. The heart is the true compass, and it knows the way. As you take your first steps, know that you are not alone. Every step you take on this journey is accompanied by an unseen hand, guiding you, protecting you, and showing you the way. The universe is a vast, interconnected web, and you are a part of it, a part of something greater than yourself. Each thought you have, each step you take, sends ripples through this vast web, and the energy you release will come back to you, multiplied. As you move in alignment with your true path, there will be moments when the road seems unclear, when the signs are difficult to read, and the world around you seems to fall into shadow. These are the moments when the soul is being refined, when the transformation is taking place. You are not lost, nor are you forgotten. You are simply in the process of becoming who you are meant to be. Every challenge, every trial, every moment of doubt is part of the alchemy that is taking place within you. Do not fear the unknown, for the unknown is where your greatest treasures lie. Your journey, like that of the alchemist, is one of transformation. Just as the alchemist transforms base metals into gold, so too will you transform the parts of yourself that no longer serve you into something greater. You will discover the gold that has always been inside you, hidden beneath layers of fear, doubt, and uncertainty. This path will require you to surrender, to let go of the need for control, and to trust in something greater than yourself. It will require you to listen deeply to the call of your soul, and to follow it without hesitation. The world may not understand your journey, for it is a journey of the soul, not of the world. But you, dear traveler, you understand. You know that the time has come to embark on this path, and that the reward will not be something you can touch with your hands, but something you will feel with your heart. You are about to set out on a journey of great significance, a journey that will shape you, mold you, and bring you into alignment with your truest self. But know this, the greatest treasure is not the material wealth that may come from your journey. No, the greatest treasure is the wisdom you will uncover, the inner peace you will discover, and the clarity that will wash over you as you align with your deepest purpose. This is your personal legend, the treasure that lies waiting for you in the depths of your soul. There will be moments when you will feel doubt creeping in, when the path will seem uncertain, and when the world will call you back to the familiar. But remember this, the true alchemist is not one who seeks external wealth, but one who transforms his own soul. The true treasure lies within, and it is in the pursuit of this inner treasure that you will find all that you have ever sought. And so, as you take your first step into this sacred journey, remember that every step is part of the unfolding of the greatest story ever told, your own. Every moment you spend walking this path, you are becoming more and more aligned with the person you were always meant to be. Trust that the universe will meet you with open arms, that it will guide you, protect you, and show you the way. The winds of the earth have called you, the stars above have called you, and now it is time to listen. The journey begins. Your personal legend awaits. Chapter 1. The Shepherd's Life, Santiago and His Dream. Santiago, a young shepherd, spent his days on the vast sun-drenched hills of Andalusia. His life was simple, yet he felt an undeniable restlessness stirring deep within his soul. The rhythm of his life was bound to the land and his sheep, and while the hills were comforting, there was an inexplicable yearning inside him that longed for something greater, something he couldn't yet define. Each day, he would take his sheep through the fields, feeling the warmth of the sun on his back and the gentle breeze as it whispered through the trees. There was peace in the quiet of the hills, a familiar stillness that calmed his heart. But Santiago was not like others who found contentment in the predictability of life. He knew that he was meant for something more, though he couldn't yet understand what it was. One evening, after a long day of guiding his sheep across the hills, Santiago lay beneath the vast, endless sky. The night was clear, the stars shining like countless jewels scattered across the heavens. He closed his eyes and drifted into a deep sleep, unaware that he was about to receive a vision that would forever change the course of his life. In his dream, Santiago found himself standing before the great pyramids of Egypt. The golden sands stretched out before him, and beneath the earth he could sense something hidden, a treasure waiting to be discovered. The treasure, however, was not just material wealth. It was a feeling, an understanding, a purpose that had eluded him for so long. He could feel it in the deepest part of his being, the pull of destiny calling him toward it. The treasure was meant for him, and yet he could not see it fully. As Santiago awoke from the dream, his heart raced. The vivid images of the pyramids and the treasure that lay buried beneath the sands lingered in his mind. His body was still, but his mind was alive with questions. Was the dream a sign, or just a fleeting vision? He had heard of dreams before, of people interpreting them as omens or messages from a higher power. But Santiago was a practical man. He knew the rhythms of nature, the language of the earth, but dreams were a different matter altogether. Yet, despite his uncertainty, Santiago could not shake the feeling that there was something more to this dream. It wasn't just a fantasy or a fleeting thought. There was a purpose in it, a message that had been delivered to him in the stillness of the night. He had always been content with his life as a shepherd, but now, something within him had shifted. A door had been opened, and he could no longer ignore the call. Santiago spent the following days in quiet reflection. He continued his work as a shepherd, but his mind was no longer fully present in the familiar tasks. He walked through the fields with his sheep, but the land no longer seemed as comforting as it once had. The dream tugged at his thoughts, urging him to consider the possibility of something greater, a journey that stretched far beyond the hills of Andalusia. He sought solace in the simplicity of his life, but the more he thought about the dream, the more it became clear that his destiny was not to remain a shepherd forever. The treasure in his dream was not just a metaphor for material wealth, but a deeper calling, a pull toward something that would fulfill the hidden longing within him. His heart was torn. Should he ignore the dream, dismiss it as a fleeting fantasy, or should he follow its call and embark on a journey that could change his life forever? Santiago had always been content with the stability of his life, the quiet joy of guiding his sheep through the hills. But now, there was a voice within him, a whisper that grew louder with each passing day, telling him that he was meant for something more. The weight of the decision pressed upon him. He was a shepherd, a caretaker of sheep, and that life had brought him a sense of peace. But peace was not enough anymore. Santiago felt as though he had outgrown his life, that the familiar hills and fields could no longer contain the fire that burned within him. The dream, vivid and full of promise, was his call to step beyond the boundaries of the life he had known. Days turned into weeks, and still, Santiago's thoughts returned to the treasure. He knew that if he stayed in the village, he would never understand what lay beyond the horizon. The call to adventure, to uncover the treasure hidden beneath the sands of Egypt, was too strong to ignore. It was as though his soul had been awakened, and he could not return to the life he had known. The decision was difficult. It meant leaving behind everything he had ever known, his family, his home, the hills of Andalusia that had been his refuge for so long. But in his heart, Santiago knew that the treasure he sought was not something that could be found in the familiar routines of his life. It was something deeper, something that could only be discovered by stepping into the unknown. And so, with a heavy heart but a determined spirit, Santiago decided to follow the call of the dream. He would leave his life as a shepherd behind, and set out on a journey that would take him far from the hills he had always known. The treasure that lay waiting for him was not just a material prize, but a revelation of his own true purpose, and Santiago knew that he could not rest until he found it. Santiago's decision was made, and the journey that would change the course of his life was about to begin. He would leave the rolling hills of Andalusia, the only world he had ever known, and venture into the unknown, guided only by the dream that had awakened his soul. It was the beginning of something profound, a journey that would lead him not only to a treasure buried in the sands of Egypt, but to a treasure buried deep within his own heart. The decision to leave his life as a shepherd was not made lightly. Santiago had always found comfort in the rhythms of the hills, the way the sun rose each day, and the simple tasks of guiding his sheep through the same familiar paths. But now, with the dream still vivid in his mind, it became impossible for him to ignore the pull of something greater, something beyond the sheep and the hills. The world outside his village, a world he had only heard of in stories and tales from traveling merchants, seemed both distant and alluring. Santiago could feel the calling, like an invisible thread pulling him toward the unknown. Yet, he was filled with doubt. The life of a shepherd was all he had ever known. It was stable, comfortable, and it offered a sense of belonging. Leaving it behind meant stepping into uncertainty, a world that was unfamiliar and full of risks. What if the dream was just a fleeting illusion? What if he lost everything in the pursuit of something he could not truly understand? The days after his decision were filled with moments of hesitation. He would walk with his sheep, his mind clouded with questions. Should he remain in the village, where life was secure, or should he abandon everything to chase after a treasure he could not yet see? The more he thought about it, the more Santiago realized that his heart was already set on the journey. He could no longer ignore the deep sense of longing that had awoken within him. The dream was not just a fleeting vision, it was a calling, a signal from the universe that he was meant to seek something greater than himself. Santiago knew that the road ahead would be difficult. He would be leaving behind the life he had built, the relationships he had formed, and the quiet security of the familiar. But the pull of the treasure, the promise of something deeper, was too strong to ignore. He could feel it in his bones. The treasure was not simply a physical object waiting to be found, but the fulfillment of his own soul's longing. The real treasure lay not in Egypt, but in the journey itself, in the discovery of his true purpose, and the unfolding of his own personal legend. But even with this realization, there was fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of making a mistake. The world around him seemed to mock his dreams, urging him to stay grounded in the simplicity of his shepherd life. "You have enough," the world whispered. "What more do you need?" But Santiago knew that it was not enough. There was something within him that demanded more, something that refused to be silenced. He had heard stories of people who sought treasure, people who ventured into foreign lands and returned with riches beyond imagination. But those stories were for others, not for someone like him. Santiago was just a shepherd, a man of the earth, not a seeker of fortunes or treasures. Yet, he could not ignore the vision that had come to him, the treasure that awaited beneath the sands of Egypt. It was as though the universe itself had called out to him, urging him to step beyond the life he knew and embrace the unknown. It was during one of these quiet moments, as Santiago sat beneath the shade of an old olive tree, that he met a man who would change the course of his journey. The man was old, with a presence that seemed to radiate wisdom and power. He introduced himself as Melchizedek, the king of Salem. Santiago, curious, listened intently as Melchizedek spoke of the concept of a personal legend. "You have a personal legend, Santiago," Melchizedek said, his voice soft yet filled with authority. "Everyone does. It is the path that we are meant to follow, the destiny that is ours to fulfill. Some people, however, are too afraid to seek their personal legend. They fear the unknown, the challenges that lie ahead. But you, Santiago, have been called to follow yours." Santiago listened in awe. He had never heard of such a thing, a personal legend. The idea that each person had a unique purpose, a destiny that only they could fulfill, resonated deeply with him. It was as if Melchizedek had spoken directly to his soul. The treasure in his dream was not just about wealth or riches, but about fulfilling his personal legend, discovering the path that had been laid out for him from the very beginning. Melchizedek told Santiago that in order to pursue his personal legend, he must be willing to take risks, to step into the unknown. The treasure that awaited him was not just a physical object, but the discovery of his true self. Santiago understood then that he could not stay in the comfort of his shepherd life forever. He was destined for something more, something greater than he could ever have imagined. You must be willing to leave everything behind, Santiago, Melchizedek said. Your sheep, your familiar life, all of it. Only then will you find what you are truly searching for. With Melchizedek's words echoing in his mind, Santiago felt a deep sense of clarity. His dream had not been a fleeting vision. It had been a call to action, a signal from the universe that he was meant to seek something greater, something that could only be found by following the path of his personal legend. Santiago knew that the time had come. He could no longer ignore the call. He decided to sell his flock of sheep, the very life that had sustained him for so many years, and use the money to fund his journey. It was a difficult decision, but one that he knew was necessary. Santiago was ready to embrace the unknown, to step into the vast world beyond the hills of Andalusia, and to follow the path that had been laid out before him. As he prepared for his departure, Santiago's heart swelled with a mixture of excitement and fear. He was leaving behind everything he knew, everything that had given him comfort and stability, but he was also embarking on a journey of discovery, a journey that would lead him to the treasure that awaited him in Egypt, and to the treasure that lay hidden within his own soul. And so, with a heavy heart but a spirit full of hope, Santiago set out on his journey. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just a shepherd. He was a seeker, a traveler on the path of his personal legend, and with every step he was moving closer to the treasure that awaited him. Chapter 2. The King and the Prophecy. Meeting Melchizedek. Santiago's journey had begun, but the world around him felt both vast and unfamiliar. The path he had chosen was uncertain, the destination still distant and unclear. After leaving his life as a shepherd, he had set off toward Tangier, unsure of the road that awaited him. The markets were bustling, the air filled with the sounds of bargaining and laughter. But Santiago couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation. His heart was still back in the hills of Andalusia, among the sheep and the simple life he had left behind. But the dream, that vivid vision of treasure beneath the Egyptian pyramids, haunted him, urging him to continue. Santiago wandered through the narrow streets of Tangier, taking in the sights and sounds of the foreign land. The city was alive with colors, smells, and voices he didn't understand. He passed traders from distant lands, merchants selling spices and silk, and travelers who seemed as lost as he felt. Despite the vibrancy of the city, he felt disconnected, as though he was an outsider in a world that didn't belong to him. He had money now, the result of selling his flock of sheep, but it didn't bring him the comfort he had expected. It was not wealth that he was seeking, but something deeper, the fulfillment of his personal legend, the treasure his heart had been longing for. But where was it? How was he supposed to find it? What steps could he take when he didn't even know where to begin? The answer came when he least expected it. One evening, as Santiago sat at a small cafe near the heart of Tangier, watching the crowd of strangers and feeling more alone than ever, a man approached him. The man was old, his clothing simple but regal, his presence calm and commanding. His eyes, dark and wise, seemed to see straight through Santiago, as though they were peering into the depths of his soul. The old man smiled kindly and introduced himself as Melchizedek, the king of Salem. At first, Santiago thought little of it. People came and went in the busy streets, claiming to be anyone they wished. Kings, prophets, and merchants passed through Tangier all the time, and Santiago had learned to be skeptical of anyone who claimed to be important. But there was something different about this man. There was an air of mystery, of quiet power, that Santiago couldn't ignore. "You seek a treasure," the old man said, as though reading Santiago's thoughts. "But the treasure you seek is not merely gold or riches. It is a treasure far greater than you can imagine, the fulfillment of your personal legend." Santiago blinked in surprise. How did this man know of his dream? How could he possibly understand the depths of his heart, the longing that had been growing within him for so long? Melchizedek smiled gently, as though he had been waiting for Santiago's question. "I know of your dream, and I know that you are searching for something more than what you have left behind. You are on a journey to find your personal legend, to fulfill your soul's deepest purpose." Santiago's heart began to race. "But how do you know this? How could you possibly understand?" "I understand more than you think," Melchizedek replied. "You are not the first soul to set out in search of their personal legend, and you will not be the last. But few are willing to follow the path that has been laid before them. Few are willing to take the steps that will lead them to their treasure." Santiago felt a surge of hope rise within him. Could it be true? Could the treasure he had seen in his dream really exist? Was there truly a path that would lead him to it? A path that had been written for him long ago? Your personal legend is the reason you are here, Santiago Melchizedek continued. It is the reason you left your life as a shepherd behind. But to fulfill your personal legend, you must trust in the signs, in the omens that the universe will send you. You must have the courage to follow the path, even when it seems unclear, even when you don't know where it will lead. Santiago listened intently, his heart racing with both excitement and fear. But how do I know what the signs are? How can I trust them? Melchizedek smiled again, his eyes twinkling with knowing. The signs are always present, Santiago. The universe is constantly speaking to you, guiding you. You only need to listen, to pay attention. But the greatest sign of all is your own heart. It will guide you when you are unsure, and it will lead you to the treasure you seek. Santiago was silent for a moment, taking in the words of the old man. His heart felt lighter than it had in days. For the first time since he had left his village, he felt as though he was on the right path, that there was something larger than himself guiding him toward his destiny. Melchizedek reached into his robe and pulled out 2 small stones. They were smooth and dark, one black and the other white. These are the stones of Urim and Thummim, he said, placing them gently in Santiago's hand. They will help you when you are faced with decisions, when you are unsure of the path to take. Use them, and they will guide you. Santiago held the stones in his palm, feeling their weight and smoothness. They were simple, unadorned, yet they carried a powerful energy. As he looked at Melchizedek, Santiago felt a deep sense of trust in the old man, in the wisdom he had shared, and in the journey that lay before him. The universe will conspire to help you, Santiago, Melchizedek said, but only if you have the courage to follow the signs. The treasure you seek is not just a physical object. It is the fulfillment of your soul's deepest desire. Trust in the journey, and you will find it. With that, the old man stood, offering Santiago one final smile. Remember, your personal legend is waiting for you, and the treasure you seek is already within you. As Melchizedek disappeared into the bustling crowd, Santiago was left standing in the square, the stones of Urim and Thummim still warm in his hand. For the first time, he felt a sense of clarity, as though the fog that had clouded his heart had lifted. The path ahead was still uncertain, but now he knew he was not alone. The universe, in all its mystery and wonder, was guiding him, and with each step he took, he would move closer to the treasure he sought. The decision to pursue the legend. Santiago stood there for a moment, the stones of Urim and Thummim warm in his hand, the weight of the old man's words settling heavily in his heart. The bustling city of Tangier seemed to fall away as he absorbed everything Melchizedek had said. The world around him, with its noise and haste, seemed distant now. All that mattered was the path that lay before him, a path that was both uncertain and full of promise. He looked at the stones in his palm, one dark and one light. The simplicity of the stones seemed profound. They were small, unassuming, but they carried with them the weight of wisdom, of decisions yet to be made. Santiago's hand closed around them, feeling their smoothness, their subtle power. What did they mean? How could these simple objects guide him through the vastness of his journey? Melchizedek had told him to follow the signs, to trust the omens. But what if he couldn't recognize the signs? What if he missed them? The thought made Santiago uneasy. After all, how was a shepherd like him to understand the vast and intricate workings of the universe? But the old man had been so sure, so certain that Santiago was on the right path. And in his heart, Santiago felt the truth of those words. Something deep within him told him that this was no ordinary journey, no ordinary quest for treasure. The treasure Melchizedek spoke of was not just wealth or material riches. It was the fulfillment of his soul's purpose, the discovery of his true self. Santiago realized that the true treasure was hidden in the pursuit of his personal legend, not in the treasure chest buried beneath the pyramids. The journey itself was the treasure, the path he would walk toward his destiny. With this realization, Santiago's doubt began to fade. Yes, the road was uncertain, and yes, there would be challenges along the way, but the desire for self-discovery, the need to fulfill his purpose, burned brighter within him than any fear of the unknown. He knew that he could no longer stay in the comfort of his past, in the safety of the life he had always known. The shepherd's life had been good to him, but it was time for him to seek something greater. Santiago tucked the stones into his pocket and looked up at the sky. The vastness of the world stretching out before him, he felt a deep sense of clarity, as though the pieces of his life were suddenly falling into place. He was no longer just a shepherd. He was a traveler, a seeker of his own destiny. The path ahead was full of uncertainty, but for the first time, he felt ready to walk it. As he walked through the streets of Tangier, Santiago could feel the weight of his decision. He had made a choice, and there was no turning back. He was not simply going to seek treasure in Egypt, he was going to seek the fulfillment of his soul's purpose. The treasure, he now understood, was not outside of him. It was within him, waiting to be uncovered. The realization brought with it a sense of peace. He felt as though he was no longer just a wanderer on the streets of a foreign city. He was a man on a mission, a man whose heart was aligned with the universe. The universe had conspired to help him, just as Melchizedek had said, and Santiago was ready to embrace the guidance it would provide. But before he could leave, Santiago knew that he needed to make a decision. What was his next step? How would he find the resources to continue his journey? His money was limited, and he was in a foreign land, far from home. But the path was clear now, and he understood that the journey would not be easy. There would be trials, obstacles, and moments of doubt. But that was part of the process. Santiago had to trust in the signs. He had to trust that the universe would provide, as it always did for those who were aligned with their true purpose. His heart was filled with both excitement and apprehension, but he knew that he could not turn back. He had come too far. His personal legend was calling to him, and it was time to answer. As he made his way toward the docks, Santiago's thoughts turned to the treasure, to the journey ahead. What would he face on this road? What would he learn? And more importantly, who would he become? The answers were unknown, but the only way to find them was to continue forward, to trust in the path that had been laid out before him. He arrived at the port and stood before the ship that would take him across the sea. The ship was large, its sails billowing in the wind, ready to carry him to a new land. Santiago hesitated for a moment, but then the words of Melchizedek echoed in his mind. The universe will conspire to help you when you are in alignment with your personal legend. With that thought in his heart, Santiago stepped onto the ship, the wind catching his cloak as he sailed away from the city of Tangier and into the vast unknown world beyond. The journey had truly begun, and Santiago knew that no matter what challenges he faced, he was no longer alone. The universe was with him, guiding him every step of the way. Chapter 3. The Journey Begins, Part 1. The road to Tangier. Santiago stood at the edge of the bustling docks in Tangier, feeling the pulse of the world beating around him. The saltwater air filled his lungs, and the distant sounds of the busy port echoed in his ears. This was no longer the tranquil life of a shepherd. The hills of Andalusia, with their simple, predictable rhythms, were far behind him now. He had crossed an ocean, left his home, and entered a world that was foreign to him in every way. The streets of Tangier seemed endless, filled with a hodgepodge of people from every corner of the earth. Merchants, travelers, and locals all mingled in a complex dance of voices, languages, and movement. The sounds of bargaining filled the air, the call of the market vendor mingling with the soft clinking of coins. While the sun beat down relentlessly on the cobblestone streets, Santiago had never felt so out of place. The life he had known was simple, tending to his sheep, watching the sun rise and set, and walking the same paths every day. Here, in Tangier, everything was new, uncertain, and fast-paced. It was as if the city itself was alive, always shifting, always moving forward, and it was merely a small part of a much larger, unknown world. He stood on the edge of the bustling market square, watching the activity around him, unsure of what to do next. The treasure that had called him here seemed so far away, distant in both time and space. It felt like a dream, a vision he had had while lying beneath the stars in the hills of Andalusia. In the quiet of his previous life, it had felt so clear, so tangible, but now, amidst the noise and chaos of the foreign city, it seemed like an impossibility. Santiago had not thought much about the practicalities of his journey when he had left home. He had dreamed of adventure, of treasure, of finding something greater than what he had known. But now that he was here, in a strange land, without the comforting presence of his flock, or the familiar roads of his village, doubt began to creep. Where should he go? Who could he trust in this bustling foreign city? How could he even begin to search for the treasure buried beneath the Egyptian pyramids when he had no idea where to start? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind him. "You look like someone who has just begun a journey." The voice said. Santiago turned to see a man standing behind him, watching him with an expression that was calm, but knowing the man was dressed in simple clothes, though they appeared well worn, as if he had traveled many miles. His face was tanned from the sun, and his eyes, though deep-set and weathered, had a quiet wisdom to them. "I am," Santiago replied, his voice cautious. "I have just begun my journey." The man smiled, his eyes twinkling. "A journey to find treasure, I presume?" Santiago was taken aback by the question. How did this stranger know? He had never mentioned his quest to anyone, especially not in a city full of strangers, and yet, somehow, this man seemed to know exactly what Santiago was seeking. "Yes," Santiago replied hesitantly, "I am looking for a treasure." The man's smile grew wider, though it was not a smile of mockery or cynicism. It was a smile of recognition, as if he understood exactly what Santiago was talking about. Everyone who seeks treasure, whether they know it or not, is also seeking something else, the man said. Some people seek fame, some seek wealth, and some seek love. But everyone who sets out on a journey like yours is also seeking the truth of who they are. Santiago felt a shiver run down his spine. The man's words resonated deeply with him, echoing something he had felt, but had never been able to put into words. He had been searching for the treasure beneath the pyramids of Egypt. Yes, but somewhere along the way, he had also been searching for himself. The man's eyes grew softer, as though he had read Santiago's thoughts. "The treasure you seek is not just gold or jewels, Santiago. It is the realization of your soul's deepest desires, your personal legend. The journey you are on is not just about finding a material object. It is about discovering who you truly are and becoming who you were always meant to be." Santiago felt a surge of understanding. He had heard of such things, personal legends, dreams, and destiny, but he had never truly understood what they meant. Melchizedek, the old man, in the square back in Andalusia, had spoken of the same thing. He had called it a personal legend, the true path that every soul must walk to find fulfillment. Now, in the midst of this strange city, this foreign land, Santiago felt the weight of those words. His journey was about more than just treasure. It was about discovering his true self. The man's voice interrupted his thoughts. "The path to your treasure, to your personal legend, will not be easy. You will face obstacles, doubts, and fears. But the treasure is already within you, Santiago. It always has been. It is only a matter of uncovering it." Santiago felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. The journey was not just about finding something hidden beneath the sands of Egypt. It was about the journey itself, the lessons, the growth, and the discovery of his true purpose. The treasure, he now realized, was not the gold, but the understanding of who he was and why he was here. The man seemed to sense that Santiago had understood. "I can tell you are ready to begin," he said. "But first, you must learn to listen to the signs that the universe will send you. They are always there, hidden in plain sight, guiding you along your journey." Santiago nodded, a sense of certainty growing in him. He didn't know exactly how, or when, or where he would find the treasure. But he now understood that the treasure was not just a thing to be found. It was an unfolding, a discovery, a path to something greater. The man smiled once more, and with a slight nod, he turned and disappeared into the crowded market. Santiago stood for a moment, watching him go, the words echoing in his mind. He was not just searching for gold or riches. He was searching for the treasure of his own soul, the fulfillment of his personal legend. With renewed clarity, Santiago began to walk down the busy streets of Tangier. He had no clear idea of where the journey would lead, but he now knew that every step he took, every choice he made, would bring him closer to the truth that lay within. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Santiago was ready to face it with an open heart. The journey had truly begun. The decision to pursue the legend. As Santiago walked through the crowded streets of Tangier, his mind was awash with the wisdom shared by the mysterious merchant. The path ahead felt both daunting and exhilarating. The city, vibrant with life, seemed to pulse with energy, and every corner he turned revealed new faces, new sounds, and new challenges. It was so different from the peaceful solitude of his life as a shepherd, and yet the bustling crowds now felt like a part of his journey. a part of the process that would shape him into the person he was destined to become. Santiago had been in Tangier for several days now, and every morning he awoke with the same feeling, a mix of hope and uncertainty. He was determined to follow his dream, but he still had no clear idea of how to begin the real search for the treasure he sought. His money, though enough to get him started, was beginning to run low, and Santiago knew that he would have to find a way to earn more if he was to continue. Yet, with every passing day, the pull of his personal legend, the path to his soul's true purpose, grew stronger. On the third morning after meeting the merchant, Santiago felt a renewed sense of determination. He stood in front of the open marketplace, where a small crowd had gathered. The air was filled with the scent of spices and perfumes. The colors of silks and woven fabrics caught in the sunlight. But Santiago's eyes were focused on something different, the uncertainty that still lingered in his heart, the desire to find a way forward. He was walking along the edge of the square when a sudden commotion caught his attention. A group of men, who appeared to be strangers to him, were gathered near a street stall. They were dressed in strange clothing, speaking a language he didn't understand, and their eyes were filled with the type of desperation Santiago had seen only in the faces of those who were lost or seeking something they couldn't quite grasp. He approached. One of the men noticed him and motioned for him to come closer. Santiago hesitated but found himself drawn to the group. His instincts told him to stay away, but the desire to find his path, to continue on his journey, pulled him forward. With every step, he reminded himself that the universe would guide him. He had to trust. "You're a foreigner, aren't you?" one of the men asked in broken Spanish. His voice was hoarse, and his eyes were filled with both curiosity and suspicion. "You don't belong here." Santiago nodded slowly, not entirely sure what was happening, but understanding enough to know he was being questioned. The man's eyes scanned him from head to toe, taking in his clothes, the small amount of money Santiago still had, and his unfamiliarity with the language. "I'm looking for something," Santiago said, feeling the weight of his journey on his shoulders. The words were simple, but they felt like the truth. "I'm seeking a treasure." The man chuckled, and Santiago could see that there was no amusement in his eyes. It was the laugh of someone who had heard too many empty promises. Too many people seeking dreams that never materialized. "Many come here seeking treasures," the man said. "But in this city, treasure is found in the shadows. Those who search too openly end up as victims, caught in the schemes of others." Santiago's pulse quickened. He was now more certain than ever that the world he had entered was one of dangers and deception, far removed from the simplicity of his life as a shepherd. The dreams he had carried with him, the hope that he could simply follow his heart, seemed suddenly fragile in the face of this gritty reality. "I will find my way," Santiago said, the words coming out more defiantly than he had intended. "I must." The man stared at him for a moment, a calculating look in his eyes. He seemed to weigh Santiago's words, sensing the quiet determination in his voice. After a long pause, the man spoke again. "You will need work if you are to survive here," he said. "There are many ways to earn money, but few lead to treasure." Santiago was confused, but felt the need to understand. "What do you mean?" The man pointed toward a stall where several men were bargaining for goods. "Some people sell their goods and make a decent living. Others try to find fortune in the games of chance, in the markets. But the real treasure, the one that lasts, is not found by chance. It is found by following the signs that are laid before you." Santiago nodded slowly, still unsure of how to proceed. "I will follow the signs," he murmured, more to himself than to the man. The man smiled, though it was a hard smile, as if he had heard the words many times before. "Then you will find your way. But know this, the treasure you seek is not a simple thing. It will demand your soul, your heart, your trust in the journey, and the road will not always be clear. But keep your eyes open and your heart open, and the universe will guide you." Santiago felt a deep sense of gratitude, mixed with confusion. The universe. Was he really supposed to believe in such things? He had believed in his dream, and he had believed in his own heart. But could he really trust in something so abstract, so intangible? As he left the market that day, the world seemed both vast and small at the same time. Santiago knew that he had made the decision to continue forward, but now he realized that the true treasure was not just a prize at the end of the road. It was the courage to keep moving, the courage to trust that the universe would guide him, that there were signs waiting to be discovered, He spent the next few days in Tangier, wandering through the streets, watching the people around him. He could see how some were content with their lives, settled into their roles. Others seemed restless, as though they, too, were searching for something but could not find it. Santiago knew that he was like them, a wanderer seeking something greater, but now he felt a sense of clarity he had never had before. The treasure was not something that could be purchased or stolen. It was something that would reveal itself as he moved forward, as he trusted in the journey. Santiago had heard the call of his personal legend, and now it was time to step fully into that path. The road ahead was uncertain, but it no longer mattered. With every step he took, the universe would conspire to help him, just as Melchizedek had said. And so, with a heart full of purpose, Santiago continued forward, trusting in the signs and in the guidance that awaited him. Chapter 4. The Crystal Merchant. The meeting with the crystal merchant Santiago had wandered the streets of Tangier for days, the vibrant city still holding a sense of uncertainty in his heart. Despite his determination to pursue his personal legend, the path before him remained unclear. He had no idea how he would continue his journey, or even how he would find the means to pay for the next leg of his travels. The uncertainty gnawed at him, but the dream, the vision of the treasure in Egypt, still burned brightly in his soul. He knew that he could not return to the life he had left behind. He had set out for something more, something deeper, and he could not turn back. On the 5th day in Tangier, Santiago found himself standing at the entrance of a small shop. The sign above the door read, "Crystal World," and inside, the faint shimmer of glass caught his attention. Intrigued, Santiago stepped inside. The shop was dimly lit, filled with the soft glow of crystal glass and the earthy scent of the place. Shelves lined the walls, and delicate glass objects of all shapes and sizes gleamed in the soft light. There were crystal figurines, colorful stones, and glistening glassware, each piece shining with an ethereal glow. The shop seemed like a world apart, a place of both magic and mystery. Behind the counter stood a man, middle-aged, with a calm face that seemed both worn and wise. His clothes were simple but neat, and his eyes held a quiet sadness, as though he had lived a life filled with both beauty and disappointment. Santiago approached the counter, feeling a quiet sense of reverence for the crystals around him. He had always been fascinated by the way light played off of glass, the way it seemed to capture the energy of the world within its delicate form. "Welcome," the man said, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How may I help you?" Santiago hesitated for a moment. He had no real need for crystals, no desire to buy anything in particular, but there was something about the shop that felt right, as though this moment had been destined. "I am looking for work," Santiago said finally, his voice soft but steady. "I am new to this city, and I have little money. I am willing to work." The man's expression remained unchanged, but there was a slight shift in his gaze, as though he were considering something deeply. "I don't usually hire travelers," the man said slowly, "but I can see that you have a fire in your eyes. What makes you think you can help me?" Santiago was taken aback by the question. He didn't have an answer, not at first. But then, as he thought about his journey, about the personal legend he was pursuing, the words came to him. "I believe that every person has something they can give, something they can offer to the world," Santiago said. "I have traveled far, and I have learned to listen to the signs the universe sends. I know that there is something I can offer you." The man looked at Santiago, his expression unreadable. Then, after a moment of silence, he nodded. Double quotes, "Very well," he said. "I could use some help around the shop. It's not much, but it's honest work. I'll teach you how to clean and polish the crystals. You can stay here for a while, and I'll pay you for your work. But know this, there are no shortcuts in life. If you want something, you must work for it." Santiago agreed, and for the next few days, he worked in the crystal shop, learning the delicate art of polishing and cleaning the glass. It was tedious work, but Santiago found that he enjoyed the process. As he cleaned the crystals, he could feel the energy they carried. The smoothness of the glass, the way it shimmered in the light, seemed to carry a kind of wisdom, a knowledge that had been passed down through generations. It felt as though the crystals themselves were speaking to him, guiding him, showing him the way. The merchant, whose name was Melchior, was kind but distant. He taught Santiago the craft of crystal polishing, but he didn't speak much of his life. He had once been a successful trader, selling crystals to people all over the world, But over the years, business had slowed, and now he was left with a small shop and a collection of beautiful glass that no one seemed to appreciate. Santiago noticed the sadness in the merchant's eyes, the way he seemed to have lost his passion for the crystals that had once brought him so much joy. There was something more to the man's story, something that Santiago could feel but could not yet understand. But as the days passed, Santiago grew to like Melchior. There was a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself, even in the face of loss. One day, as they sat in the shop together, cleaning and polishing the crystals, Santiago decided to ask Melchior about his past. "Why did you stop trading crystals?" Santiago asked, his voice gentle. Melchior paused for a moment, his hands stilling on the crystal in front of him. He looked at Santiago, his expression unreadable. "It's a long story," he said finally. "I once believed in the power of crystals, in the beauty they could bring to people's lives. But somewhere along the way, I lost my passion. I grew tired of the endless trading, the pressure to sell, to make a profit. I wanted to help people, to share the beauty of the crystals. But it all became about the money, and I lost sight of why I started this journey in the first place." Santiago listened quietly, feeling a deep sense of empathy for the man. He understood Melchior's words, understood how easy it was to lose sight of one's true purpose when the world around them became consumed by the desire for wealth and success. "I think you're still helping people," Santiago said softly. "These crystals are beautiful. They have a power in them, even if you can't see it anymore. You're still sharing that power with the world, even if it's not in the way you once imagined." Melchior looked at Santiago, his eyes softening. "Perhaps you're right," he said quietly. "Perhaps there is still some beauty in what I do, even if it's not the way I once thought it should be." A new beginning. Santiago continued to work in the crystal shop, each day bringing him closer to the realization that the road to his treasure was not going to be as straightforward as he had imagined. At first, the work felt repetitive, the polishing of crystal after crystal, the careful handling of delicate glass. Yet, as he worked, he began to notice something deeper, something that Melchior had failed to see in his years of trading. The beauty of the process itself. Santiago had always been someone who found solace in the simple rhythms of life, whether it was tending to his sheep or walking through the hills of Andalus. Now, as he worked with the crystals, he realized that the act of polishing, the gentle scrubbing and buffing, was like a meditation. It was a process of transformation, of bringing out the hidden beauty within each piece of glass. Just as he had been polishing the crystals, Santiago realized he was also polishing his own soul. The process of cleaning, of refining, was just as important as the treasure he sought. One afternoon, as he was polishing a particularly beautiful piece, Santiago overheard a conversation between Melchior and a potential customer. The customer was interested in buying some of the crystals, but when Melchior quoted a price, the customer hesitated. "You see," Melchior was saying, "these crystals are rare. They have been collected over the years, and they carry a special energy, but no one really understands them, so the price is higher than most would expect." Santiago paused, listening carefully. He realized that Melchior's shop, once a place of trade and fortune, had now become a place of loss and stagnation. The merchant was no longer selling crystals for their inherent beauty or power, but merely as commodities to be exchanged for money. And though Melchior's eyes were still filled with knowledge, there was no longer the same spark of passion in them. The customer eventually left the shop, and Santiago approached Melchior, his hands stilling as he placed the crystal he had been polishing gently on the counter. "Melchior," Santiago said, his voice steady, "why do you still sell these crystals if you no longer believe in their power? Why do you continue to work in a business that doesn't bring you joy?" Melchior looked at him, his face wrinkled with the weight of years. There was a sadness in his eyes, a weariness that only time and disappointment could bring. "I once believed in the power of the crystals." Santiago had once believed they could change people's lives, but after so many years of trading them, of chasing after profit, I lost sight of what they really represented. Now, it's just about survival. I sell the crystals because it's the only thing I know, but I don't expect anyone to understand their true value anymore. Santiago felt a pang of sympathy for the merchant. He knew that Melchior's words held the truth of many lives, that the pursuit of wealth, of success, could so easily overshadow the pursuit of one's true purpose. Santiago had seen this before, in the lives of others, and he knew that it wasn't too late for Melchior to find his way again. but it's not too late. Santiago said softly, you can still believe in them. You can still share their beauty with the world. Melchior looked at him, a flicker of something, hope, perhaps, passing through his eyes. You're right, Santiago. I have lost my way. I've forgotten why I started this business in the first place. I've forgotten the magic that these crystals once held for me. But perhaps there is still time to remember. Perhaps there is still time to find my purpose. Santiago smiled, feeling a sense of understanding between them. It wasn't just about the crystals. It was about rediscovering the passion and purpose that had once driven them both. Santiago knew that the journey wasn't just about the treasure in Egypt. It was about finding what was lost along the way, rediscovering the beauty of the world and the magic that existed in every moment. Melchior's eyes softened as he placed a hand on Santiago's shoulder. You've taught me something important, Santiago. Thank you. In the days that followed, Santiago's work in the crystal shop began to take on a new meaning. He wasn't just polishing glass. He was polishing his own soul, learning the importance of patience and persistence. As he worked, he started to understand that his journey wasn't solely about finding a hidden treasure in Egypt. It was about learning to see the world with new eyes, to appreciate the process, the journey, and the growth that came with each step. Santiago realized that he had found something far more valuable than gold or riches in the crystal shop. He had found the joy of creation, the understanding that every act of work, no matter how small, was a part of his own transformation. The universe had conspired to bring him to this place, to help him learn that true wealth came from within, and that his personal legend was a journey of the soul, not just the body. The crystal shop had become a symbol of his own journey. Just as the crystals needed time and care to reveal their beauty, so too did Santiago need time and care to uncover his true potential. Each crystal he polished was a step closer to understanding his purpose, his calling. And each day he spent with Melchior brought him closer to understanding the importance of following his heart, of pursuing his dreams, no matter the obstacles that lay in his path. One day, as Santiago was polishing a particularly intricate crystal, he heard Melchior's voice behind him. Santiago, I have an idea. I've been thinking about what you've said, about finding my purpose. I want to try something new. Santiago turned to look at him, his eyes filled with curiosity. What do you mean? I'm going to open a new shop, Melchior said, his voice filled with excitement. A shop that will sell not just crystals, but the story of each crystal. I want people to understand the magic behind them, the energy they hold, the beauty they can bring into their lives. I want to share my passion again, not just sell objects for money. Santiago smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride for the merchant. He had rediscovered his purpose, his passion, and he was ready to take the next step in his journey. Then let's do it, Santiago said, his heart full of gratitude. Let's make this happen. Chapter 5. The alchemist. The encounter with the alchemist. Santiago had spent many months working in the crystal shop, learning the craft, and growing both in skill and in wisdom. As time passed, he began to feel a restlessness stir within him once more. The treasure he had sought, the one he had dreamed about beneath the stars in Andalusia, still seemed distant, but now he understood that the treasure was not simply something to be found in a foreign land. The treasure lay in the journey itself, in the lessons, the growth, and the transformation he experienced along the way. But even with this understanding, Santiago knew that his journey was far from complete. His heart yearned for more, for the fulfillment of a deeper calling. He had already learned so much, but something within him told him that he had not yet reached the end of the road, that there was still more to discover about himself, about the world, and about the treasure he had been searching for. One afternoon, as he sat outside the crystal shop, watching the sun begin its slow descent behind the hills of Tangier, Santiago saw a man approaching in the distance. He was cloaked in the traditional robes of an alchemist, and his steps were purposeful, each one filled with a sense of quiet power. The man moved with a grace that seemed otherworldly, as though he was at once part of the earth and yet apart from it. Santiago rose to meet him, drawn by the unmistakable aura of wisdom and knowledge that surrounded the stranger. As the man approached, Santiago noticed his eyes dark and penetrating, full of depth and experience. There was something ancient in his gaze, something that seemed to see beyond the present moment, beyond the surface of things. I am looking for the alchemist, the man said, his voice calm but commanding. Santiago felt a sudden, inexplicable sense of recognition. The alchemist, the very one he had heard of in stories and legends. Could this be him? The one who had the power to turn lead into gold, the one who understood the mysteries of the universe. "I am Santiago," he said, introducing himself, though he was unsure why. He simply felt the need to share his name with the man before him. The alchemist smiled, as though he had been waiting for this moment. "I know who you are, Santiago. You have been searching for a treasure that you have already found, though you do not yet understand its true nature." Santiago's heart raced. How could this man know so much about him? How could he know what he had been searching for? The dream that had brought him from the hills of Andalusia to this foreign land. "I have learned many things on my journey," Santiago said slowly, "but I still feel that something is missing. I do not understand what it is, but I know that I must continue searching, that I must move forward." The alchemist nodded, as if he had been expecting this answer. "You are on the right path, Santiago, but you are seeking something more than treasure. You are seeking the soul of the world, the essence of the universe itself. The treasure you seek is not a thing, but a force. It is the power that flows through everything." Santiago listened intently, trying to understand the words of the alchemist. He had been searching for gold, for material wealth, but now he was beginning to see that there was something far greater at play. The treasure was not just something to be held in the hand, it was something that could only be felt, something that connected him to the world in a way he had never known. "The treasure you seek is not outside of you," the alchemist continued. "It is within you. It is the realization of your own potential, the understanding that you are a part of the great energy that flows through the world. The journey to find this treasure is the journey to understand your own soul." Santiago felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. The alchemist's words resonated with something deep within him, something that had been stirring since he first left his home in Andalusia. The treasure was not a material object, but the fulfillment of his personal legend, the discovery of his true self. "But how do I find it?" Santiago asked, his voice full of both hope and uncertainty. The alchemist's eyes softened. "You have already found it, Santiago. You just need to learn to listen to the signs, to trust in the omens, to understand that the universe is always guiding you toward your destiny." Santiago took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the alchemist's words. For the first time, he felt as though he truly understood what his journey had been about. It had never been just about the treasure in Egypt. It had always been about understanding himself, about discovering the deeper purpose that had been guiding him all along. "Come with me," the alchemist said, his voice filled with quiet authority. "I will show you the next step on your journey." And with that, the two of them set off together, the alchemist leading the way. Santiago's heart was full of both excitement and fear, but he knew that this was the moment he had been waiting for. The journey had led him to this point, to this meeting, and now he was ready to take the next step. The alchemist's guide and Santiago followed the alchemist through the desert, the vast, silent landscape stretching out before them. The heat of the sun bore down upon them, and the wind, warm and soft, whispered through the sand. It was a quiet, sacred place, one that seemed to hold the mysteries of the world within its emptiness. The stillness was profound, broken only by the soft sound of their footsteps on the sand and the occasional rustle of the wind. As they walked, the alchemist spoke little, but Santiago's mind was filled with questions. He had come so far, and yet he still did not fully understand what it meant to fulfill his personal legend. The treasure he sought seemed elusive, as though it was just beyond his reach, hidden behind layers of mystery that he couldn't yet decipher. The alchemist had spoken of the soul of the world, of the energy that flows through all things, but Santiago still didn't fully grasp its meaning. "Why do we walk so far?" Santiago asked, his voice filled with curiosity. "What is it that you want to teach me?" The alchemist turned his eyes toward him, his expression calm but intense. "The desert is not a place of silence, Santiago," he said, his voice steady and filled with wisdom. "The desert speaks, but only to those who are willing to listen. Every grain of sand, every gust of wind, every moment in this vast emptiness holds a lesson. If you learn to listen with your heart, you will hear the voice of the world itself." Santiago paused, the weight of the alchemist's words settling into his heart. The desert, with its endless expanse of sand, had always seemed to him like an empty void, a place of desolation, but now, as he stood in its midst, he realized that it was far more than that. The silence was not an absence, it was a presence, a presence that spoke in a language beyond words, a language that could only be understood by those who had learned to listen. As they continued their journey, the alchemist shared with Santiago the wisdom of the desert, teaching him the importance of patience, of listening to the signs, of trusting in the journey itself. It was not enough to search for the treasure. Santiago had to become the treasure. He had to understand that everything around him was connected, that the energy of the universe flowed through all things, and that every moment, every experience, was part of the greater tapestry of life. You have been searching for something outside of yourself, Santiago, the alchemist said, as they sat down by a fire one evening. But the truth is that the treasure has always been within you. The journey is not about finding the gold. It is about discovering who you are meant to be. The gold is simply a symbol of your transformation, a sign that you have fulfilled your purpose. Santiago listened intently, his heart full of both wonder and understanding. He had always believed that the treasure was a physical object, something to be held in his hands, something that would prove his success. But now he realized that the treasure was not a thing at all. It was the journey itself, the lessons he had learned, the person he had become along the way. The alchemist smiled as if he knew exactly what Santiago was thinking. The universe has a way of revealing the truth to those who are ready to receive it, but you must be willing to trust in the process. You must learn to see the signs, to understand the omens, to listen to the whispers of the world. Santiago nodded, feeling the weight of those words. It was as though a veil had been lifted from his eyes, and he could now see the world in a new way. The desert was not an empty wasteland. It was a place of profound wisdom, a place where the answers to his questions were already waiting to be uncovered. Over the next few days, the alchemist taught Santiago to read the signs of the world, to listen to the elements of nature, and to trust in the wisdom that flowed through the earth. They spoke of the soul of the world, the energy that connected all things, and how Santiago's journey was part of a much larger plan. The treasure he sought was not just his own, it was a part of the grand tapestry of life, and by finding it, he would be fulfilling his place in the universe. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear in the vast desert sky, Santiago sat with the alchemist by the fire. The air was cool now, the desert night settling in around them. The fire crackled softly, and the world felt peaceful, still, as though everything was in its proper place. "Do you know why the wind speaks to you, Santiago?" the alchemist asked, his voice gentle but filled with a quiet power. Santiago looked at him, his curiosity piqued. "I don't understand. How can the wind speak?" "The wind speaks to you because you have learned to listen with your heart," the alchemist said. "When you are in tune with the world, when you understand the language of the universe, you begin to hear the whispers of the wind, the songs of the earth, the wisdom of the stars. It is the same energy that flows through everything. And when you align yourself with it, when you trust in it, you become part of the great mystery of life." Santiago felt a deep sense of peace in those words. It was as though everything he had ever searched for, everything he had ever longed for, was within his reach. The treasure was not something external, something to be grasped. It was something internal, something that lived within him, waiting to be discovered. The alchemist's voice softened as he spoke again. "The world will show you the way, Santiago, but you must be willing to walk it. You must be willing to trust in the journey, to follow the signs, to become the person you were always meant to be." Santiago closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the fire and the cool desert breeze on his face. He could hear the wind now, its voice soft and full of secrets. The journey had always been about more than just the treasure. It was about becoming who he was meant to be, about fulfilling his personal legend. And with each step he took, he was getting closer to that truth. Chapter 6. The Soul of the World, the Wisdom of the Desert. The days in the desert passed slowly, each one blending into the next, like the endless stretch of sand before Santiago. He and the alchemist continued their journey through the arid landscape, their path leading them deeper into the vast emptiness. The desert, once a place of fear and uncertainty for Santiago, now seemed to pulse with life, full of silent wisdom that only those willing to listen could hear. Santiago had learned much. During his time with the alchemist, the teachings were simple yet profound, and they resonated deeply within him. The alchemist spoke often of the soul of the world, the energy that connected all things, that flowed through the earth, the sky, the animals, and the people. It was the source of all life, the force that guided the universe and allowed all things to exist in harmony. As they journeyed on, the alchemist spoke to Santiago about the importance of understanding this energy, of learning to align oneself with it. He explained that the soul of the world could not be understood through intellect alone. It had to be felt, experienced, and embraced. Santiago began to realize that his quest for treasure was not just about finding something external, but about aligning himself with the very energy that created life. One afternoon, as they stopped to rest beneath the shade of a solitary tree, the alchemist turned to Santiago and said, "Do you understand the soul of the world, Santiago?" Santiago looked at him, his eyes full of curiosity. "I understand that it is the energy that connects all things, but I do not fully know how to become one with it. How do I align myself with this force?" The alchemist smiled, as though he had been expecting this question. "The soul of the world is not a thing to be controlled or understood through the mind. It is a living, breathing energy that flows through all things. To align yourself with it, you must learn to listen with your heart, to trust the signs that it sends you, and to surrender to the journey of your personal legend. It is only when you truly trust the process of life that you will begin to understand the soul of the world." Santiago nodded, the words resonating deeply within him. He had come to understand that the journey was not just about the destination. It was about learning to trust the process, to trust the universe, and to surrender to the flow of life. Each step he took, each decision he made, was part of the larger plan that the universe had set in motion for him. He was not alone on this journey. The soul of the world was guiding him, just as it guided all things in the universe. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the desert, the alchemist spoke again. "The soul of the world speaks to all those who are in tune with it. It speaks through the wind, the stars, the earth, and the animals. It speaks to the heart of those who are willing to listen. But most people cannot hear its voice because they are too busy searching for things outside of themselves. They are caught up in the noise of the world, and they forget to listen to their own hearts." Santiago reflected on the alchemist's words. He had been one of those people, caught in the noise of the world, distracted by the pursuit of wealth, success, and the external markers of achievement. But now, he realized, his journey was not about accumulating material wealth. It was about discovering the wealth that lay within the treasure of his soul, the fulfillment of his personal legend. As the days passed, the desert began to reveal itself to Santiago in a new light. The harsh, unforgiving landscape was no longer a place of fear, but a place of beauty and wisdom. He had learned to see the desert with new eyes, eyes that could see beyond the sand and the heat, to the energy that flowed beneath the surface. The wind whispered to him, and the stars spoke to him in the silence of the night. The desert had become a teacher, guiding him on his journey towards self-discovery. One night, as they sat around the fire, the alchemist turned to Santiago with a serious expression. "The soul of the world is not something that can be understood through intellect alone. It must be felt, experienced, and embodied. You must trust your heart, Santiago, and listen to the signs that the universe sends you." Santiago nodded, understanding now that the journey was not about logic or reason. It was about the heart, the soul, and the connection between all things. To truly understand the soul of the world, he had to become one with it. He had to trust in the signs, in the omens, and in the wisdom that the universe was constantly offering. As the fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on the sand, Santiago closed his eyes and listened to the wind. It was soft and gentle, carrying with it the distant scent of the earth and the promise of the journey ahead. He knew now that the treasure was not just a thing to be found, but a state of being, a state of alignment with the energy of the universe, the mastery of the soul. The days passed, and the lessons continued. Santiago's connection with the desert deepened as the alchemist guided him through each step of the journey. The desert, once an imposing and unfamiliar place, had become a sacred landscape for Santiago, one filled with hidden truths, whispers of wisdom carried on the wind, and the silent pulse of the soul of the world. Each grain of sand, each gust of wind, seemed to carry with it the essence of the universe itself. The alchemist had taught him many things, but one lesson stood out above the rest. To understand the soul of the world, one must first understand the soul of oneself. Santiago had spent so long searching for a physical treasure, something he could touch, hold, and possess, that he had never realized that the true treasure lay within him. It was not something to be discovered in a distant land, buried beneath the sands of Egypt, but something that had been inside him all along, waiting to be awakened. One evening, As the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, the alchemist turned to Santiago and said, "There is something I must teach you. Now, it is the most important lesson of all. To master the soul of the world, you must first master your own soul." Santiago looked at the alchemist, his heart full of anticipation. He had learned so much already, but this new lesson seemed even more profound. The alchemist had often spoken of the soul of the world, of the energy that connected all things, but now Santiago understood that the key to understanding the universe was within himself. His own soul was the key to unlocking the mysteries of the world. To master the soul, the alchemist continued, is to understand its desires, its fears, and its purpose. Every soul has its own language, its own way of speaking to the world. You must listen to your soul's voice and trust in its guidance. When you do, the soul of the world will reveal its secrets to you. Santiago was silent, reflecting on the alchemist's words. He had always trusted his heart, his intuition, but now he realized that there was more to it. He had to learn to listen to the deeper currents of his soul, to understand the whispers of his inner voice. The journey he had undertaken was not just about discovering the physical treasure, but about discovering the treasure of his own soul. The alchemist continued, "The desert is a place of transformation. It is where the soul is forged and purified. Here, in the vast emptiness, you will learn to hear the voice of your soul more clearly than ever before. You will understand its desires and its fears, and you will learn to trust it completely." Santiago felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. He understood now that the desert was not just a harsh, barren landscape. It was a place of growth, of inner alchemy, where the soul could be refined and transformed. Just as the alchemist turned base metals into gold, so too could Santiago transform his soul, aligning it with the greater energy of the universe. The next morning, the alchemist led Santiago to a quiet spot in the desert. The sand stretched out endlessly before them, the sky above clear and vast. The air was still, as though the desert itself was holding its breath. "Sit with me," the alchemist said, "and listen to the silence. It is in the silence that the soul of the world speaks most clearly." Santiago sat down beside him, closing his eyes. At first, all he could hear was the sound of his own breathing, the beating of his heart. But then, slowly, the sounds of the desert began to emerge, the faint rustling of the wind, the distant cry of a bird, the subtle movement of the sand beneath his feet. It was as if the world itself was alive, speaking in a language that was beyond words. "The soul of the world is always speaking," the alchemist said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "But most people do not listen. They are too caught up in the noise of their lives, in the distractions of the world. But the soul speaks in silence, in the stillness of the heart. You must learn to hear it." Santiago sat in the stillness, letting the desert's silence fill him. The longer he sat, the more he felt a deep connection to the world around him. The sand beneath him, the wind in the air, the vast sky above it, was all part of him, and he was part of it. In that moment, Santiago understood that the soul of the world was not something outside of him. It was within him, and it was within everything. He had always been connected to it, even when he didn't know it. Now, the alchemist said, "Let the energy of the world flow through you. Feel it in your heart, in your soul. When you align yourself with the soul of the world, you will find that your desires are not separate from the world's desires. You will be part of the great flow of life, and the universe will conspire to help you." Santiago closed his eyes and focused on his heart, on the beating rhythm of life that flowed within him. He felt a deep, powerful energy surge through him, a sense of connection to everything around him. The desert, the earth, the wind, it was all part of the same energy, the same soul. He could feel it now, in every breath he took, in every movement of his body. It was then that he realized the treasure he sought was not outside of him. It was within him. The true treasure was not gold, nor jewels, nor material wealth. It was the realization of his connection to the soul of the world, the understanding that he was part of the great flow of life. The treasure was the journey itself, the transformation of his soul, and the wisdom that came from aligning himself with the universe. The alchemist's voice broke through his thoughts. "Now you are ready, Santiago. The journey is not over, but you have taken the first step toward understanding the soul of the world. You are no longer just a traveler seeking treasure. You are a part of the universe itself, and the universe will guide you." Santiago opened his eyes, feeling a sense of peace and clarity that he had never known before. He was ready for the next step, ready to continue his journey with a heart full of trust and understanding. The treasure was not something to be found, it was something to be lived, something to be embraced in every moment of the journey. And so, with the desert's wisdom in his heart, Santiago continued forward, his soul aligned with the soul of the world, ready to discover the true treasure that awaited him. Chapter 7. The Treasure Revealed. The final test. The wind began to shift, and the once unchanging desert seemed to be alive with new energy. Santiago could feel it in his bones, in the very air he breathed. It was as though the universe itself had awakened to his presence, drawing him closer to the treasure that had been hidden all this time. For the first time in his journey, Santiago realized that everything had led him to this moment. Every step, every lesson, every challenge had been preparing him for the final test. The alchemist had taught him to trust the soul of the world, to understand the language of the elements, to listen to the heart of the earth and the wind. He had learned to read the omens and follow the signs, and now, standing on the edge of the vast desert, he knew that the treasure he sought, not just the gold beneath the pyramids, but the treasure of his soul, was within reach. The alchemist's presence had become a quiet, guiding force, always encouraging Santiago to push forward, to trust the process. Santiago had learned that the journey itself was the treasure, that the true fulfillment of his personal legend lay in the wisdom gained along the way. But there was still one final step to take. They had arrived at a small oasis, an emerald jewel, amidst the desert sands. The palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of water trickling from a nearby spring filled the air. The oasis was a place of refuge, of peace, and Santiago could feel its energy wrapping around him like a protective cocoon. "The treasure is close now," Santiago the alchemist said, his voice steady. "But you must trust yourself. You must trust in what you have learned, in the strength of your soul, and in the power of the universe. The final test is not one of your body or your mind, it is a test of your heart." Santiago looked at the alchemist, his heart filled with anticipation. "How will I know when the test has come?" he asked. "You will know," the alchemist replied. "The universe will show you the way, just as it has shown you every step of this journey. You must be ready to recognize it." Santiago nodded, understanding that the final test would require him to embrace all that he had learned. He had faced countless challenges on his journey, the fear of the unknown, the uncertainty of his path, and the temptation to return to the life he had left behind. But now, after all he had been through, he felt a sense of calm resolve. He was ready. As he walked deeper into the oasis, Santiago came upon a small group of travelers. They were sitting by the water, their faces weathered by the harsh sun of the desert. There was a strange tension in the air, a feeling of impending change. Santiago approached them cautiously, his instincts telling him that this was a moment of significance. One of the travelers, a man with dark eyes and a weathered face, stood up and approached him. "What brings you to this oasis?" the man asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. "I am searching for a treasure," Santiago replied, his voice steady. "I have followed my personal legend, and I believe the treasure lies within this place." The man eyed him curiously, as if sizing him up. "A treasure, you say? Many come to this oasis in search of something, but few ever find what they are looking for. What makes you think you will be different?" Santiago's heart pounded, but he stood tall, the wisdom of his journey flowing through him like a river. "I have followed the signs. I have learned to listen to the soul of the world. I trust that the treasure is within reach." The man regarded him silently for a moment, then nodded. "You are brave, young traveler. But remember this, the treasure you seek is not always what you expect. It may come in a form that you do not recognize." With those words, the man stepped aside, allowing Santiago to pass. The moment felt charged with meaning, and Santiago's senses heightened. He knew that he was close to the treasure, that the final test was upon him. He approached the spring, the water shimmering in the afternoon light. As he knelt down to drink, he felt a sudden surge of energy, the same energy he had felt when he first set out on his journey, the same energy that had guided him through the challenges of the desert and beyond. Suddenly, the water rippled, and the surface of the spring parted, revealing something beneath the water's surface, something shining, something gold. Santiago's heart skipped a beat. Could it be the treasure he had sought for so long? He reached down into the spring and pulled up a small chest, heavy with gold. The chest gleamed in the sunlight, its intricate designs reflecting the light. Like a mirror, Santiago's heart raced with excitement as he opened the chest. revealing the treasure he had been seeking. But as he gazed upon the gold, a realization struck him. This was not the true treasure. It was a symbol of the treasure, a reflection of the wealth he had acquired, but it was not the ultimate fulfillment of his personal legend. Santiago had learned that the true treasure lay not in the physical gold, but in the journey itself, in the lessons he had learned, and in the person he had become along the way. With a sense of clarity and peace, Santiago closed the chest and set it aside. He stood up and gazed out at the horizon, the vast desert before him. He had found the treasure, yes, but it was not what he had expected. The treasure was the wisdom he had gained, the understanding of his soul's true purpose, and the realization that the universe had been guiding him all along. That as he turned to leave the oasis, Santiago knew that his journey was not over. He had completed one chapter, but there was more to discover, more to learn. The treasure was not the end, but the beginning of a new journey, one that would continue to unfold with each step he took. The return to the beginning. Santiago stood in the oasis, the chest of gold gleaming before him, yet something within him felt strangely still, as if he were holding a mere symbol of the treasure, rather than the fulfillment of his dreams. He had spent years of his life traveling, believing that his journey would lead him to a physical object of wealth, a physical proof of his success. He had searched far and wide, from the hills of Andalusia to the sands of Egypt, driven by a dream that had never let him rest. And now, as he gazed upon the gold, he realized that he had been searching for something that was never meant to be found in a chest or buried beneath the earth. His heart, once filled with longing for material wealth, was now full of peace and understanding. He had reached the treasure, but it was not the gold that mattered. It was the journey, the lessons, the experiences, the wisdom that he had gained along the way. Santiago understood now that the treasure he sought was not something that could be held in his hands. It was something that lived within him, something that had always been within him. The alchemist's words came back to him. The treasure you seek is not a thing, but a force. It is the realization of your soul's deepest desire, the understanding that you are a part of the great energy that flows through the world. Santiago had spent so much time searching for an external treasure that he had forgotten the most important lesson. The treasure was the process of becoming who he was meant to be, of discovering his personal legend, of aligning himself with the soul of the world. The chest of gold, beautiful as it was, became insignificant in that moment. Santiago knew that he had already found what he had been seeking, the deeper understanding of himself, of his connection to the universe, and the wisdom of following his heart. The gold, while symbolizing the culmination of his journey, was merely the outward manifestation of something much more profound, the fulfillment of his soul. Santiago closed the chest, feeling a quiet reverence for the journey that had brought him here. It was not the end, but a new beginning. The road to the treasure had led him to a new understanding of life itself, a realization that every step, every challenge, and every moment had been part of the process of awakening to his true self. As he left the oasis, Santiago felt a sense of lightness in his heart. The winds of the desert blew softly around him, whispering the ancient wisdom of the world. He had learned to listen to those winds, to feel their guidance in his soul. He had discovered that the universe would always conspire to help those who are aligned with their personal legend, but only if they were willing to listen, to trust, and to follow the signs. Santiago's journey had come full circle. He had started as a shepherd, dreaming of treasure, and now he understood that the treasure was never about the material wealth. It was about the wisdom he had gained, the understanding that life itself was the greatest treasure of all. He had discovered the importance of trusting in the process, of surrendering to the flow of the universe, and of understanding that the soul's true purpose could never be found in external things. As he walked away from the oasis, Santiago looked back one last time, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the path he had walked. He had found what he was meant to find, not in Egypt, not in the gold, but within himself. The treasure was not just a physical object to be obtained. It was the realization of his soul's deepest desires, the fulfillment of his personal legend. The world, with all its beauty and mystery, stretched out before him, and Santiago knew that the journey was far from over. The treasure had been revealed, and with it, a new understanding of his place in the world. He was no longer just a wanderer, seeking something outside of himself. He was a part of the universe, connected to the great energy that flowed through all things. The world, in its infinite wisdom, had shown him the way, and he had walked it with an open heart. trusting in the signs and the guidance of the soul of the world. Santiago smiled, his heart full of peace and gratitude as he stepped forward into the future, knowing that the journey was the treasure, and the treasure was within him all along. Chapter 8. The Return. The Homecoming. Santiago had finally returned to the land that had first called to him, the hills of Andalusia, the very place where his journey had begun. It felt surreal to be back. The journey that had started with a simple dream of a treasure buried beneath the Egyptian pyramids had transformed him. It had shaped his soul, revealed his personal legend, and guided him to a deeper understanding of life and the world. But standing now in the familiar land of his youth, Santiago felt a sense of bittersweetness. The road had been long, and the treasure he had sought was not the gold he had originally imagined. It was something more profound, something intangible. The treasure was not an object to possess, but an experience to be lived, a journey to be embraced. The simple, humble life of the shepherd no longer seemed like enough for Santiago. He had learned too much, seen too much, and experienced too much to return to a life of quiet routine. The village, though comforting in its familiarity, seemed small now, a far cry from the vastness of the world he had seen. The open sky, the endless stretches of desert, the towns and markets filled with people from all over the world. These were the things that had shaped him. They had opened his eyes to the grand possibility of the world, and the deeper connections that ran through everything. And yet, as he wandered through the village, walking past the houses and fields where he had once lived, he felt a profound peace. The treasure he had sought was not something external. It was the wisdom he had gained, the connections he had made, and the understanding of his true purpose. He had discovered his personal legend, and in doing so, he had discovered himself. Santiago spent the first few days back in the village, simply observing. He watched the villagers go about their daily lives, their routines, as predictable and repetitive as they had always been. Some greeted him with smiles and curiosity, asking about his travels. Others were skeptical, questioning whether he had truly found the treasure. Santiago didn't mind their questions. He had come to realize that the true treasure was not something that could be shared through words. It was something that had to be experienced, something that could only be understood by those who had walked the same path. He visited his old family home and sat by the well where he had once spent hours thinking about his dreams. The well, which had once been a symbol of his longing for something more, now felt like a quiet monument to his past. He had been so young then, filled with a restless desire to break free of his life as a shepherd. But now, as he sat by the well, Santiago understood that there was nothing to escape from his past. His life as a shepherd had been an essential part of his journey. It had taught him the most important lessons about patience, perseverance, and the beauty of the simple things in life. One afternoon, Santiago found himself wandering back to the fields where he had once tended his sheep. The familiar landscape stretched before him, the same hills, the same trees, the same blue sky. But now, as he walked through the fields, he could see them through different eyes. The world around him had changed, not because it had shifted, but because he had. He had become someone different, someone who understood the deeper currents of life, who saw the connections between all things. The world had always been magical, always been full of signs and omens, but he had never noticed until now. Santiago felt the familiar pull of the earth beneath his feet, the gentle sway of the wind against his skin, and the warmth of the sun on his face. These had always been constant companions in his life, but now they felt like old friends who had waited patiently for his return. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let the peace of the moment wash over him. But even as he savored the tranquility of the familiar surroundings, Santiago knew that he could not remain in the village forever. The road ahead, the path of his personal legend, still called to him. He had found the treasure, but the treasure was not something to be hoarded. It was something to be shared, something to be lived, and something to be passed on to others. The journey, Santiago realized, was never truly over. It was a cycle, a constant flow of learning, growing, and discovering new truths about the world and about oneself. He began to understand that the treasure was not about accumulating wealth or possessions. It was about the transformation of the soul, the awakening of one's true purpose, and the realization that we are all connected to each other, to the world, and to the universe itself. Santiago's journey had been a path of self-discovery, of understanding his place in the world, and of fulfilling his personal legend. But the journey was never meant to end. It was meant to be a continuous unfolding, a constant process of growth. and understanding. As Santiago walked through the fields, he knew that he had reached a new beginning. The treasure had been found, but it was only a symbol of something greater. The real treasure was the understanding that life itself was a treasure, and that every moment, every experience, was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to connect with the soul of the world. The treasure within Santiago's return to the village brought him peace, but it also brought a deeper understanding of what his journey had truly been about. The days passed slowly, and the familiar rhythms of life settled around him like a comfortable blanket. Yet Santiago could feel the pull of the journey within him, not as an urge to leave, but as a quiet call to continue living in alignment with the lessons he had learned. He had gone to Egypt in search of treasure, but the journey had revealed that the treasure had always been within him, waiting to be uncovered. Though he could see the beauty in the simple life around him, Santiago knew that his transformation wasn't meant to be kept to himself. It wasn't just about finding gold or material wealth. It was about discovering the richness within the soul. He had learned to trust in the universe, to listen to the omens and signs, to surrender to the flow of life, and most importantly, he had learned that the true treasure was in the journey itself. The gold he had uncovered beneath the pyramids was a part of the treasure, yes, but it wasn't the true treasure. The gold had been a symbol, a confirmation that the journey had led him to the right place. But now, as he looked at the chest of gold, Santiago understood that the real value of his quest had been the wisdom and transformation he had experienced along the way. He was no longer the young shepherd who had left his village in search of a dream. He was a man who had learned to listen to the world, to see the signs, and to embrace the beauty of each step along the way. One evening, as the village settled into the quiet of night, Santiago went to the small hill where he had once sat, gazing at the stars. It was there, under the endless sky, that he had first dreamed of the treasure, and it was there, under the same sky, that he now understood what his dream had truly meant. The stars above twinkled as brightly as ever, and as he sat on the cool earth, Santiago felt a sense of connection to the world, to the people around him, and to the universe. He had come to realize that he was a part of the greater whole, that his journey was not just his own, but was woven into the fabric of life itself. Every person he had met, every experience he had been a part of the unfolding of his personal legend, and now, as he looked at the stars, Santiago understood that the universe had always been guiding him. Santiago smiled softly to himself, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had discovered his personal legend, and in doing so, he had found the treasure, not in gold, not in jewels, but in the realization that life itself was the greatest treasure. He had found the wisdom he had been searching for, the understanding that the pursuit of one's dreams was not just about the destination, but about the journey. And that was a treasure that no one could ever take away. The village, with all its simplicity, now seemed to offer a deeper richness. The people here were content with their lives, and Santiago understood that this contentment came not from material wealth, but from an alignment with their own purpose. However simple that purpose may have seemed, Santiago had spent so long searching for something outside of himself that he had forgotten to appreciate the beauty of the simple moments, the quiet connection between the earth, the sky, and the people around him. He knew that he could share this wisdom, this treasure, with the people in the village. He could live his life in alignment with the lessons he had learned, showing others that the journey to fulfillment was not about external things, but about internal transformation. Santiago had become the living embodiment of his personal legend, and now it was time to share that with the world around him. As the days turned into weeks, Santiago returned to the rhythms of village life, but his heart was full. He had learned to listen to the world, to trust in the signs, and to live in harmony with the flow of life. The gold was safe in the chest, but it no longer held the same importance it once had. The real treasure was not in what he had found, but in what he had become. Santiago knew that the path he had walked was just the beginning. The universe had shown him the way, and now he would continue his journey, not to find something new, but to live fully in the knowledge that everything he needed was already within him. One day, as he sat under the shade of the tree in the village, Santiago smiled. He had learned that the greatest treasure was not something that could be hoarded or possessed. It was a state of being, a recognition of the interconnectedness of all things, and a deep understanding that life itself was the greatest gift. The chest of gold sat quietly beside him, a symbol of the journey he had undertaken, but Santiago knew that the true treasure had already been revealed. He had found what he had been searching for, not in Egypt, but within himself, and that knowledge, that understanding of the soul of the world, would guide him for the rest of his life. Chapter 9. The Return of the Treasure. The buried secret. Santiago had always believed that the treasure was a physical object, something that could be held in his hands and displayed for all to see. But after everything he had learned from the crystal merchant to the alchemist, from his experience in the desert to his return to the hills of Andalusia, he now understood that the treasure was not just a physical manifestation, but the culmination of his journey, the wisdom he had gained, and the peace he had found within himself. Despite this understanding, there was one part of the journey that Santiago could not shake, the place where the treasure had been buried. The dream he had had so long ago in the abandoned church, the vision of a chest beneath the sycamore tree, remained vivid in his memory. It had been the starting point of his journey, the reason he had left his life as a shepherd, the motivation that had led him through the vast desert and into the heart of Egypt. It seemed, in some ways, that the physical location of the treasure was a necessary part of the journey. Santiago could not deny that a part of him still longed to return to that church, to dig beneath the tree and see if the treasure truly lay there. But the question lingered in his mind. Why would he need to do so? He had already found the deeper treasure, the realization of his personal legend, the understanding that the journey itself was the treasure. And yet, something called him back to the place where it had all started. It was as if the universe itself was reminding him of where the journey began, and where it must now come full circle. One evening, as the moon rose high in the sky, casting its soft glow across the quiet village, Santiago made his decision. He would return to the abandoned church, to the place where his journey had begun, and see for himself if the treasure was still buried there. He could not ignore the pull of that first dream, the promise of something greater that had always driven him forward. As Santiago walked back through the familiar hills and valleys, his mind wandered to all the lessons he had learned along the way. The crystal merchant had taught him the value of perseverance. The alchemist had shown him the importance of listening to the soul of the world, and the desert had revealed the strength of his own soul. He had learned that treasure was not a thing to possess, but a state of being, a connection to the universe. He had discovered that the true treasure was not outside of him, but within him. Yet, as he neared the church, the image of the sycamore tree, of the chest buried beneath it, still filled his thoughts. The universe had guided him to this moment, to this place, and Santiago knew that whatever he found, it would be the final piece of his journey. Arriving at the old church, Santiago stood before the ruins, the place now familiar, yet distant. The tree, once a symbol of the treasure he sought, still stood tall and proud, its roots twisting deep into the earth. The sight of it filled him with a deep sense of peace, as though he had come home to a place that had always been a part of him. He could hear the rustling of the leaves in the breeze, the quiet sounds of the night surrounding him. It felt as though the world had waited for him to return, as if the journey itself had been leading him here all along. Santiago knelt before the tree, his heart full of gratitude. He reached down and began to dig, his hands moving with purpose. As he dug deeper into the earth, he could feel a connection to the place, to the land, to the very soil that had once been the home of his dream. The treasure was close, and he knew that the moment was now. It was not about the gold, but about the understanding that had led him here. The journey had been the treasure, and now, this final act of digging was the last step in his transformation. Finally, his hands brushed against something solid. His heart skipped a beat as he pulled the chest from the earth. It was the same chest from his dream, the one he had imagined so many times, intricately carved and worn by the earth, but still beautiful. With a sense of reverence, Santiago opened the chest. Inside, he found not just gold, but something more. It was filled with jewels, precious stones that gleamed in the moonlight. But as he looked deeper, Santiago realized that the true treasure was not the jewels, but the understanding of the journey that had brought him here. The gold and jewels were a symbol of the wisdom he had gained, the fulfillment of his personal legend. They were proof that the universe had conspired to help him find the treasure. But the real treasure, the one that had transformed him, had been within him all along. As Santiago closed the chest, he smiled softly to himself. He had completed the journey. The treasure was not the gold, but the transformation he had undergone, the wisdom he had gained, and the understanding that the world, in all its complexity and mystery, was a reflection of his own soul. Santiago stood up and looked out at the horizon, the moon shining brightly above. He He could feel the connection to the land, to the universe, and to himself. The journey had been the treasure, and now he was ready to share the lessons he had learned with the world. With a heart full of peace, Santiago turned and began the journey back to the village, knowing that the path ahead was still unfolding. The treasure was within him, and now he would carry it with him wherever he went. The journey had taught him that true wealth was not something to be hoarded or possessed, but something to be lived, shared, and experienced. And so, Santiago walked forward into the future, ready to embrace whatever the universe had in store for him. The fulfillment of the personal legend. Santiago stood in the stillness of the night, the chest of gold and jewels before him, yet it no longer seemed to matter. His hands, which had once trembled with the anticipation of finding a treasure to prove his worth, were now calm, steady, as he reflected on everything he had learned. The gold and jewels, gleaming beneath the moonlight, were no longer the symbols of a quest for external validation. They had become symbols of the wisdom he had gained, the journey he had taken, and the self-discovery he had achieved. For so long, Santiago had believed that the treasure was an object, something to be held, something that would make him wealthy, powerful, and fulfilled. But now, as he stood before the chest, he realized that the true treasure was not in the gold or the jewels, but in the journey itself. It was in the lessons learned along the way, the people he had met, and the transformation that had taken place within him. The treasure was the realization that he had found his personal legend and had lived it, and that in living it, he had unlocked the deepest truths about himself and the world around him. As Santiago closed the chest and set it down beside him, he felt a deep sense of peace, an understanding that he had come full circle. The treasure he had sought had always been within him, and the journey that had led him to this moment had been the key to unlocking it. He had been guided by the soul of the world, by the omens, by the whispers of the universe, and now he was ready to embrace the true meaning of his personal legend. He stood up and took one last look at the church, the place where it all began. It felt like a lifetime ago that he had stood in that very spot, dreaming of a treasure buried beneath the earth. He had come so far since then, but the world around him, the village, the hills, the vast desert, all seemed the same, yet they were not. He was not the same person who had left this place. He had learned to listen to his heart, to trust in the guidance of the universe, and to follow his soul's true path. Santiago understood now that the journey was not just about the destination. It was about embracing the process, trusting the signs, and allowing the universe to unfold in its own time. The treasure was not an object to possess, but a realization to be experienced. The gold and jewels were symbols, yes, but the real treasure was the transformation that had taken place within him. The understanding that the universe had conspired to help him fulfill his personal legend. With the chest of gold at his side, Santiago began his walk back to the village. The road felt different now. The once familiar landscape seemed new, seen through the lens of his deeper understanding. His heart was full, not with the excitement of material wealth, but with the satisfaction of knowing that he had completed his journey, that he had followed his personal legend and had found the true meaning of the treasure he had sought. That as Santiago approached the village, he noticed the familiar faces of the people, the simple lives they led, and he realized that their treasure was different from his. The villagers were not necessarily in search of gold or jewels, but they had their own personal legends, their own paths to walk. Some might be content with their lives, while others, like him, might still be seeking. But Santiago knew that everyone's path was unique, and that the true treasure was not in what was found at the end of the journey, but in the journey itself. He thought of the alchemist, who had taught him so much about the soul of the world, and of Melchizedek, who had shown him that the universe conspired to help those who were aligned with their personal legend. He thought of the crystal merchant, who had rediscovered his passion for life, and of the people he had met along the way, who had shown him the importance of following his heart. Every experience, every challenge, every lesson had been part of the treasure. Santiago understood now that the real reward was the wisdom he had gained and the connection he had made with the world. As he returned to the village, Santiago felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything he had experienced. He had fulfilled his personal legend, and in doing so, he had found the treasure he had been searching for all along, not in gold or jewels, but in the realization of his own soul's potential. Santiago's journey had taught him that the universe is always guiding those who are willing to listen, that the signs are always there, and that the treasure is not a destination to be reached, but a process to be lived. And now, as he stood before the village he had left so many years ago, Santiago knew that he had not only found the treasure, but had become the treasure. Chapter 10. The conclusion and final lesson. The true treasure. Santiago stood at the edge of the village, his heart full of peace, yet restless with a quiet excitement. The journey that had begun with a dream of treasure buried beneath the Egyptian pyramids had led him through deserts, through encounters with powerful figures, through trials of trust, patience, and self-discovery. But now, standing here in the place where it all began, he realized that the treasure he had sought was not something buried in the earth, not a chest of gold or jewels. It was something deeper, a realization that had come not at the end of the journey, but throughout the journey itself. Santiago had learned that the treasure was not an object to be possessed. It was a state of being, a connection to the soul of the world, and an understanding that everything in the universe was interconnected. His dream, the vision of treasure, had been his guide, but the true lesson had been in the journey, in the people he had met, the places he had been, and the wisdom he had gained along the way. The treasure had always been within him, waiting to be uncovered. He now understood that the universe speaks to those who are willing to listen. The omens, the signs, the subtle messages that had guided him from the beginning were all part of the same energy, the soul of the world that flowed through everything. He had learned to trust his heart, to listen to the whispers of the wind, and to follow the guidance of the universe. And in doing so, he had found the treasure, not in a physical sense, but in the deep realization that he was part of something greater than himself, that the journey itself was the true reward. The treasure was not just a goal to be achieved, it was the wisdom he had gained, the transformation he had undergone. The real wealth was not gold, nor jewels, nor material possessions, but the deep understanding of his own soul, the connection to the world around him, and the alignment with his personal legend. Santiago had learned that true fulfillment comes not from external achievements, but from the internal alignment with one's heart, one's desires, and the universal energy that connects all things. The path Santiago had taken had brought him back to where he started, to the simple life of a shepherd. Yet, as he looked at the familiar hills, the quiet village, he no longer felt the restlessness he had once felt. He had discovered that the world was full of signs and messages, waiting for those who were ready to listen. He had learned that every step of the journey, every challenge, and every encounter had been a part of his transformation. Santiago sat by the well where he had once dreamed of his treasure. The same well, the same earth, the same sky, and yet everything was different. He was no longer the young shepherd who had set out to seek material wealth. He was a man who had walked through the world, listened to the signs, and learned the profound wisdom of the journey. The treasure was not something to be possessed, but something to be experienced. It was the wisdom of trusting the journey, the magic of the world, and the fulfillment of one's deepest desires. As he sat by the well, Santiago thought about the people he had met along the way. The crystal merchant, who had rediscovered his passion, the alchemist, who had taught him to listen to the soul of the world, Melchizedek, who had shown him that the universe conspires to help those who follow their personal legend. Each of these people had been part of his path, helping him realize that the treasure was not in material wealth, but in the wisdom of the journey and the realization of his own purpose. Santiago's heart swelled with gratitude as he gazed up at the sky. He had found the treasure, but the treasure was not an object to be held. It was a way of living, a way of being aligned with the universe and one's true self. The journey had revealed to him the deeper truths of life, that the universe is always speaking, always guiding, and that the greatest treasure is not something to be found, but something to be lived. Santiago smiled softly to himself, knowing that his journey was far from over. He had come full circle, but the circle itself was infinite, a continuous unfolding of wisdom and understanding. He had learned the lesson that the treasure he sought had always been within him, and now he was ready to share that lesson with the world. The journey continues. As Santiago sat by the well, gazing at the familiar landscape of his village, he understood now that the treasure was not just about gold or jewels, nor was it about the destination. It was the culmination of a deeper spiritual awakening, the realization that his journey had always been one of self-discovery. The gold and the jewels were symbols, but the true treasure was the wisdom he had gained, the knowledge of how to live in harmony with the soul of the world. In this stillness, Santiago felt the winds of the desert once again, the same winds that had carried him across vast distances, through unfamiliar lands, and into the very heart of his purpose. The winds now felt like a friend, a gentle reminder that everything was connected. The universe, he knew, had conspired to bring him here to this moment, to this realization. Santiago smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of peace wash over him. He had discovered his personal legend, and in doing so, had found the greatest treasure of all, the ability to listen to his heart, to trust the signs, and to see the interconnectedness of all things. The path that had once seemed long and uncertain was now clear. Every step, every decision, every encounter had been part of the great design, part of the divine rhythm that had led him to where he was. The gold and jewels were beautiful, yes, but Santiago knew that they were not the end. They were merely a confirmation that the journey he had taken was right, that the universe had guided him, and that he had fulfilled his purpose. But beyond the material wealth, the greatest wealth, was the understanding that his soul was in harmony with the world. He had followed the omens, listened to his heart, and aligned himself with the soul of the world. He thought about the people who had shaped his path, the crystal merchant, who had reminded him of the importance of following one's passion, the alchemist, who had taught him to transform not just base metals into gold, but to transform his soul, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who had introduced him to the idea of the personal legend. Each person had played a crucial role in his transformation, helping him see that the world was full of signs, and that the treasure was not something to be found, but something to be lived. Santiago stood up and walked toward the village, feeling a renewed sense of purpose in his heart. He was no longer just the shepherd who had dreamed of a treasure buried beneath the pyramids. He was a man who had seen the world, understood its mysteries, and discovered the magic that flowed through all things. And now, he understood that his treasure wasn't something to keep to himself. It was something to share, not just in words, but through the way he lived, through the example he set. That as he walked through the village, Santiago could see it through new eyes. He could see the people, their routines, their quiet lives. But he knew now that there was a treasure in every life, in every moment. The villagers were all part of the same universe, connected by the same force that had guided him, and in that realization, Santiago felt a deep sense of peace. He understood that the true treasure was not in material wealth, but in living with an open heart, in seeing the beauty in every moment, and in listening to the world. Santiago returned to the old church where his journey had begun. He stood in the same spot where he had once dreamed of treasure, and now, with a deep sense of fulfillment, realized that the real treasure was not buried beneath the earth. It was not a thing that could be dug up or possessed. It was the wisdom, the love, and the understanding that he had discovered along the way. The true treasure was the journey itself. Santiago knelt down by the sycamore tree, and with a deep sense of gratitude, he placed the chest of gold and jewels back into the earth. It was not because he no longer valued the treasure, but because he knew that he no longer needed to possess it. The gold and jewels had fulfilled their purpose. They had confirmed the truth of his journey, but the true wealth was in the transformation of his soul. He had become the treasure. As he stood up, Santiago looked out at the horizon, the vast expanse of the desert stretching before him, and felt a deep connection to everything, the land, the people, the universe. He had completed his personal legend, and he knew that the journey was never truly over. Life was a continuous unfolding, a series of moments to be embraced, to be lived with passion, with purpose, and with love. And in that realization, Santiago felt a quiet peace settle. In his heart he had found the treasure, but more importantly, he had found himself.